Hi friends! Just by the looks of it, yes, we are covering Artist Couture's newly released Supreme Mauves. Happy to finally get my hands on the palette, or happy to finally film with it. Funny story, I filmed with the palette yesterday and was just completely horrified by my chipped nail polish. Looking over the footage, I found it unacceptable and I'm like, let's do this again. We got the nails painted, and although not mauve, I could have went more lilac, but I did teal and peach instead. I'm sorry. If it's your first time here, hi, I'm Alicia. I love to talk about eyeshadow palettes, reviewing them, tutorialing them, doing all the things. I'm also an online coach who specializes in flexibility and movement in general, but I still love to talk about my makeup. Today we'll go over the details of the palette. I still consider this a first impressions, although I had used it already. I'm still wrapping my head around it because from the looks of it, judging from the reviews I read on Sephora, this is not the favorite amongst the three. When I say three, the three main baddies from Artist Couture, these are the big size palettes. The brand does have smaller curations, but Supreme Mauves is the newest addition to the, I believe, how many we got in here? 12 shade palettes. And I was speaking about the fact that I wanted to pick this up during the Sephora sale, which I did. It retails for $45, but I did get that 20% off. And I chose to buy this over the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2 palette, which looks to be a hit, and not that I am ignoring the fact that it's beautiful. I have Major Dimension 1, the first palette from Patrick Ta. I simply adore it. And going into the warm pink color story with the Patrick Ta eyeshadow formula, they were going to nail it. They were going to nail it. I wanted to go with Artist Couture simply because I thought these shades were more up my alley, touching on the violet, the mauve. Definitely, this is a mauve tone palette, but the nuances here, I think, more unique for me in terms of the different shades of mattes and metallics. When we get into the swatches, you'll see the metallics are on the drier side, very different than what exists in Supreme Nudes. Supreme Nudes includes these creamier metallics, which was one of the favorable features of the palette, and unfortunately that formula is not found in Supreme Mauves. What's found here is what I think was introduced in Supreme Bronze, a slightly drier texture that had a lot of sparkle and shine, and when swatched and light hits, is actually quite lovely. However, might not be the favorite formula from the Artist Couture brand. More on that in a bit. I mentioned the price, $45, 12-month expiration shelf life, bulk made in USA, assembled in a Dominican Republic. Black plastic design with a magnetic closure, round edges here, beveled size detailing on the lid, Supreme Mauves here on the top, and you have a mirror here. Nice strong hinge as well that stands up on its own. And one of the admirable features from Artist Couture palettes is just the size. I think this is ideal to travel with, and having 12 shadows at your disposal without taking up so much space. Despite how much I love Gemini 2, they're tougher palettes to pack. You will have to use a bigger makeup bag, but I find the average size makeup bag doesn't fit Melt Cosmetic palettes. So I do favor this size more so than the bigger palettes. And again, just its slim design, versatility with it fitting in several makeup bags and shapes is a win for me. Let's start with Overexposed. Matte Porcelain Rose. Risque. Sparkling Rose Champagne. This is one of the drier formulas. It has beautiful shine, but I think you can see the texture here on camera. You will need a little more stick from your primer if you want those bits to stay on the lid. Provocative. Matte Taupe Mauve. Let's try that again. Matte Taupe Mauve. Mauve. Stripped down. Sparkling Mauve. You have to pick up a lot from this shade. I love the base color, but you really gotta warm it up so that color shows up on the lids. Look, I'm in the palette. Kinky. Matte Light Brown Mauve. Oh, I love this shade. Lust. Matte Mauve. Audacious. Matte Caramel Berry. Obscene. Sparkling Duochrome Cranberry Violet. One of the more creamier shades, not as dry as Risque or Stripped Down. Lovely. It has that cranberry with the violet shift. I think hopefully you can see it there on camera. Still not the same formula like the metallics found in Supreme Nudes, but still pretty. Royale, a matte taffy mauve. Sex Appeal, sparkling duochrome peach magenta. Seductress, sparkling purple. And last we have Prestige, a matte deep plum. So here are all the shades from Supreme Mauves, and I did apply some of the shadows yesterday. I actually have some B-roll to show you because I wanted to see how these mattes showed up individually on the lids. Overexposed as it was described, a porcelain rose, great for brow bone highlight as you see here, and a great route to go, especially because a lot of these metallics are very sparkly, arcly, perhaps not the go-to texture for brow highlight, so you at least have overexposed for that task. And then I went in with Kinky, and the light brown mauve shade, no matter what brand has this in their eyeshadow palettes, I absolutely love the fact that it's not too warm, not too cool. The fact that it has that mauve undertone, I feel it great to wear alone through the crease and also across the lid, just for some added dimension without it being your typical light brown. On the other lid, I applied Lust, which is more of the mauve tone, and despite it being cooler in nature because it does lean more mauve, again, great to just have through the crease. It doesn't warrant more shadow. It adds a little more depth into my crease where I can just slap on Prestige as a wing liner, or I'll just dip out and use a brown liner, apply mascara. But again, the mauve undertone allows for my eyes to have some dimension and not appear flat. And then in terms of still it being brown, but the berryness to it just adds beautiful smoke where I can apply this all across the lid and lower lash line, and it has that smoky day element that's not too intense, perfectly colored in terms of the hue. Again, with mascara, Royale was the one I was most excited to try, and the fact that it is more violet leaning, definitely more mauve-y out of all the mattes here. Great to have this tone without it being too purple, because I know people might get intimidated by the mauve tones, but mauve is a great in-between neutral. I probably actually consider it a neutral, along with the neutral browns and the bronzes. I think it's just a more unique take on an all matte eye. Again, instead of relying on your typical neutral shades, add some character, relying on the color itself and not necessarily the finish. Great to have it in here. And then I went in with Sex Appeal. And Sex Appeal, again, as I had mentioned before, these are drier formulas, and maybe that is a compromise that has to be made, but to deliver that twinkle effect as if the sun is shining on water, stardust, disco ball vibes, okay? I think the shade naturally has to be a touch drier. Maybe that's not the case. Other brand, whether it's indie or mainstream, that still has that same twinkle effect, but a little more emollient, you can let me know. But I found the trade-off with these textures being drier is that the effect is lovely, especially when you shine a hard light on it. On the other side, I applied Obscene, which I'm happy there's a cranberry shade in here. Even though it's more red leaning, it's just a nice escape from the mauve tone, so it breaks apart the monotonous of it, which totally fine. It's monochromatic, I love, but happy that a warmer, more vibrant shade was included in this palette. Now, Risque was tricky to pick up with a dry brush. I did apply it with Max Fix Plus yesterday. I'll demo that again in this video, but Risque is going to be your quote-unquote glitter shade, and what many people in the reviews describe these shades to be, dry, glittery mess, is what I quoted. The general consensus from the palette. I would treat Risque like I would a Pat Astral shade. Tap it once with your finger and dab it on any of the metallics here if you wanted more of that twinkle effect. And then I applied Prestige on the outer corner. I think I did this before I applied one of the metallic shades. Prestige is definitely drier out of all the mattes, and I would suggest you use a shader brush to plop down the shadow on the outer lid first and then fluff. Kind of ruined my gradient a little bit, and I had to fix that error, but All in all, I love the tone of Prestige. It's smoky, but not too much, but you can build up the intensity to your liking. I haven't seen the other mattes in here on deeper skin tones. I'm not entirely sure how washed out they would appear, or they would show as their undertone and not just a desaturated mauve, so you will have to let me know down below. The sparkly textures for sure will show up well, but the mattes would translate. So with all details and swatches out the way, why don't you come in a little closer? That's enough. I have Linda's Infinity palette on. I've been using that thing nonstop. Something I haven't done in quite some time is use a concealer for my eye primer. I do have Linda's primer, which I've been thoroughly enjoying, but these mattes are on the drier side. So a Linda-like primer, I don't think an ideal medium to work on given the consistency of these shadows, but something a little more stickier. Yes, I understand concealers might not be ideal for longevity, but if you have a primer solely dedicated for the eyes, perhaps go for the one that has a little more tack on the dry down instead of having that more silicone finish like the Linda primer. Let's take Provocative, as I did not start with that matte yesterday during the B-roll. And you can see here the concealer is going to bring out a little more color from the shadows. I feel that makes for easy blending, very soft on the edges. And again, this tone is just one of my favorites. Mauve anything. Sign me up. And let's take a look at Lust. Lust, I believe, has a little more brown, where Provocative is much cooler in undertone. It's almost like Lust is a beigey mauve. So there is Lust, again, more rosy mauve. I'm such a fan. Now let's take Prestige, and I'll tap that on the outer part of this lid where we applied Provocative. And as I mentioned when going over my B-roll, I think, and once you've applied enough to where you want that depth to show, you can then return to your fluffer and get those edges blurred. And I'm tossing back and forth between both brushes here so I can get the right amount of haze, as I want it to show up very smoky. But I love the color. I love the color. Again, this matte is the driest out of